Welcome to the Return of WADJEDI Serpent Power podcast. Here we explore the science of serpent energy and how it is used in yoga, ritual, and medicine to achieve the highest levels of fitness, emotional and sexual wellness, financial prosperity, healing, and spiritual mastery. I'm your host, Fly Priestess, and I invite you to join me on this captivating journey of self-discovery and empowerment.
Okay, everybody. Hello. Welcome to my third episode of the Wadjet Yoga Physical Health series. I like to address different questions that come up or different comments that I see people engaged in conversation and things like that, you know, when they have some kind of relation to yoga. And one of the common questions that I've been finding is that, number one, people often will use terms like kundalini or chi to talk about the Wadjet energy that moves through the body. And this is understandable because we haven't been using energies, systems, and relationships between objects and beings in our own cultural terminology. So that's something that we need to get more familiar with. So this episode is dedicated to changing that and initiating that changeover, because that's something important. There are aspects, a lot of people think it doesn't matter if you use this or that as long as you get there, but it does make a difference what sort of cultural tools that you use, especially in something as important as your spiritual development and practice. The aim and focus and end goal of all spiritual systems is not the same. If you tap into your inner being and you actually question why you came here as the being that you are, the natural answer to this would be to explain that you're here to be the being you're supposed to. You are a certain culture, you're a certain gender, you were born into a certain time period that has certain technological tools, certain social, like a different type of social behavior, class, understanding as other time periods in history have. So there's a reason why you were born in this time, in this place, in the body that you have, in the gender that you have. And understanding that will give you some more clarity on understanding your purpose and your destiny. So if you are born into a body by the wisdom, by the divine intelligence that designed you into what you are before you got here, then it stands to reason there has to be a reason that you have chosen to be as you are and not anything else. So to be as you are and then still choose tools that relate in a better way to beings that are different than you, then you wouldn't. I mean, it's interesting that we have the ability to make a distinction between something like making sure we use men's or women's deodorant depending on our gender, but then we won't use the spiritual tools of our own gender, racial defined being, in the spiritually defined being that we are. We'll still use any old tools as though everything is exactly the same. So I find that to be a really interesting kind of, I don't understand that. So that's something that it seems like on the basic human, worldly, earthly level, we can make clear distinctions between something being different in this sense or different in that sense, and then choose what's for us. But then when it comes to spirituality or things that we are less able to tap into and to reach with our five senses, we tend to fall away as though these things are all just kind of some sort of metaphysical soup where everything is exactly the same once it's been reduced to a certain realm or to a certain dimension. And that's something that we need to kind of wake back up to and to see. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, if anybody is interested in calling in today, the guest phone number for calling in is 657-383-0709. please feel free to join us. Everybody is welcome. You can call in. And also you can go to Blog Talk. I've posted the link in the event, and it's also on my Facebook page. So if you go to my Facebook page, to Wadjet, you can click the link right there. And here, let me go ahead and find it. Just make sure that the link is there for anybody who wants to see. You can go right to, yes, it's right on my page, so you can just go to that, and I'm going to repost it here for anybody who wants to click and join in. So as I said, if you go straight to the top of my page, you can find it and gone in. You can listen in while you're driving or running around doing your Saturday errands or things like that. Glad to have you. Okay. All right, so back to discussing the difference here. So for example, okay, one of the main things, because this comes up so commonly, I'm going to discuss other cultural things that we use, but one of the most obvious ones is talking about the Wadjet. Wadjet, as many of you, who either have the book or follow the Kemetic path or who just have an understanding of this, know that Wadjet is the serpent power. She is a goddess of serpent power, and she is a goddess who is based at the base of the spine. There's a coil. The energy is coiled up, and it's stored there. And you, in your life, tap into this energy. Sometimes it gets tapped into accidentally or through trauma or through other means. And those are ways that we don't want to tap into the Wadjet energy. We want to actively and consciously tap into the energy, allow it to unfold in a specific rhythm and path, because as that energy moves through the body, in the same way that waves of energy move and circulate, if they move and circulate in a harmonious pattern, where the waves are all the same distance, the movement is the same, it's steady, it's harmonious and flowing, then the energy moves throughout our body, and we open up to our spiritual awakening, to our physical health, and to our emotional and divine power in a much more clear and smooth way. Whereas if this is open traumatically, it's more similar to when for example, like when the off-rhythm sound is played, when you hear something clanging, and you can tell that the waves of the motion of this off-rhythm sound are going the waves are not the same pattern, they're not the same length, and when the waves of energy of the Wadjet energy move through your body like that, you can develop too much energy in one area of your body. For example, in one organ can overtake a great deal of energy, and another organ can be weakened in energy if the wave pattern is not moving properly through that specific organ. In the emotional field, and cause you to have an overbalance of emotions or not enough emotions. It can cause issues with dreams and problems. So a lot of people are aware of what's commonly called Kundalini rising. But this is the Wadjet energy. This is how the energy is supposed to move through you slowly, smoothly, and harmoniously in order for your greatest spiritual awakening. And this Wadjet power, we're used to seeing this, so we're aware that all African kings, all kings in ancient Kemet rather, had this crown, they wore crowns that all had this Wadjet serpent sticking up off the front of the crown, because in order to even become a king, a man had to go through the man who was chosen to be king had to go through a great deal of spiritual work, become the maximized human that he was able to be, based on the DNA, which was so carefully preserved within the royal bloodline, and through his own work and his own proof of what it was that he could be. So in order to represent his mastery of the Wadjet power that moved through him, that he had fully activated in order to be able to rule a nation and to run a nation and to represent a nation and to fight for a nation, he wore this every crown with this Wadjet snake sticking up off the front. Now we're used to seeing this everywhere, and then somehow still, even though we can see clearly that our own culture had the Wadjet energy, had this energy. We still somehow choose to keep calling this Kundalini, 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 just because that's a popular and common term. And we're thinking that, if anything, oh, it doesn't matter because they're probably the same thing. But we have to remember that the religion in India has been corrupted by the invasion of the Aryans. So what started out as the same Kundalini snake goddess coiled at the base of the spine was diluted and altered and changed into something else with a different goal and function than what the Kundalini energy had in its original African purpose. So in the African understanding, in the Kemetic understanding, every African person has a Ka. Every person who was descended from Kemet has a Ka. They have a double, a being that is their higher self. So what we would commonly call today as our higher self. There is a being who is guarded, who is an aspect of a specific divinity. And these guardians guide us to our destiny. They guide us through our lives. They open us to our own intuition. They clear paths for us in order to make the way so that when we are actively living and choosing to be and live our destiny, they are our assistants in that path, in that process. Now, in other systems, for example, in the Hindu system today, which still refers to Kundalini, which still recognizes the Kundalini energy, there is no Ka, there is no body double who is assigned to a specific deity who is a guardian of a person's life. There is no such thing. So when the Kundalini energy rises all the way up in the body, the maximum place that it can go to with an understanding of Kundalini in the sense that it's been shared out is to rise up into the crown chakra, and to go around and flow through the body. And that's what it does. That's it. So by referring to Kundalini, it's literally erasing an entire aspect of the function of what the Wadjet power, serpent power rising up the spine actually is. And this is an issue with tapping into the culture of others, is that in the original source and the original way these were designed to be, and by you coming as the being that you are, you may be missing a huge slice of the culture of who you are actually designed to be. So if you came here as an African person and you have a Ka, and yet you are following the path of Kundalini and have no idea that you have a Ka, when you activate your Kundalini power, what are you going to do with it? What is it going to lead you to? Where does it take you? It definitely, under any system, activating your serpent power will take you to and change you. They will all transform you. But to what end are you going to be transformed? And this is a real serious issue that we have to really understand, the limitations that we set on ourselves by not following our full spiritual system as it was originally given, as it was designed for specific beings, and as it is designed for the being that you are here to be. So there's a section in my book, in Wadjet Yoga, Understanding Serpent Power, where I actually discuss culture and yoga, and so I'm just going to share that so that we can have maybe a little more clarity and understanding on that. The purpose of culture in a physical sense is to answer the material needs for food, air, and water, shelter, and sleep. And in the spiritual sense, the purpose of culture is to answer the need of the soul to remain connected to its point of origin. Because we are social beings, we also need families, friends, and communities in which to flourish, both at the survival level and at the level of spirit. The development of traditions that we can share that make us feel connected to something greater than ourselves is a necessary part of our emotional and spiritual health. When we adopt the cultural norm of a group that has a different physiological or emotional needs than we have, or a different historical reference than we have, it can often have detrimental effects to our psyches, because we cannot fully integrate into the adopted culture and therefore often feel separate or disjointed. For those who have been culturally marginalized, it can feel very welcoming to adopt a set of principles, physiological and emotional needs while connecting you to a historical frame of reference more in keeping with your own history than the culture around you that you have been forced to adopt or have accepted by default. Although yoga has traditionally been connected solely with Indian culture, its origins are known in fact to originate in ancient Africa. However, its universal principles are a framework that can be overlaid by any culture. Wadjet Yoga uses the African physiological, spiritual, and historical frame of reference to address the physical needs for nutritious food, clean air and water, correct sleeping and hygiene habits, as well as the spiritual need to be connected to our source. The African civilization in ancient Kemet, which is ancient Egypt, produced such a superior civilization whose accomplishments we still marvel at and which are unrivaled by any other culture since, that it makes sense to develop and follow a system of personal development based on their culture. Function of choosing, the purpose of choosing Wadjet Yoga, the purpose of choosing one style over another is that in your spiritual practice, what you do, what foods are recommended, because yoga can be as simple or as complicated as you, whatever energies you bring to it or what you're looking for out of it. So if you're looking for something just to help you become more healthy, yoga is something that can do that. But you would become more healthy by eating foods that are right for your body type, that suit the nutritional needs of your physical form. You would seek to get the right amount of sleep for the physical form that you are in. You would, the right amount of sleep, the right amount of rest. You would have hygiene. You would use these things based on your form, because even Western science now knows that even all physical forms are not the same. All the years of, we're all the same and it's only skin deep and those sort of things have been proven to be a lie. And there are distinct differences in the amount of vitamins needed, minerals needed, the amount of sunlight required, the amount of sleep, all sorts of things that have physical differences, and these are based on the places on Earth where our bodies originated. We originate to a specific environment of the Earth, and the Earth is not a dead thing underneath our feet. The Earth is alive, so the Earth gives off specific energy in different regions of the entire world. So there are specific energies that the form, so wherever, in whatever point of origin your ancestral line is, you carry in your DNA the memory and to respond to activate to, and to thrive with specific energies and specific environments. And so the energies of those things are represented through the foods, they're represented through specific crystals and places, they're represented through the type of air, through the types of wood, all sorts of energies that come from those specific environments, the type of animals that are in those environments, design and develop our totems. And there are certain animals that are, would be taboo to eat or not eat in certain regions because of your ancestral bloodline and your federation. So again, people will say something like these bad diets with the blood type of this or the blood type of that, but what people really don't want to say is you're actually different based on what part of the earth that you actually come from. And we have to really take this into consideration. So if we can recognize that our physical needs, such as vitamins, minerals, amount of sleep, amount of sunlight needed, are actually different depending on our physical structure, we have to also remember that our spiritual forms, which have a structure of their own. See, we've been tricked into believing that a spirit is just like either a thought or just some blob mass of light, of just floating light energy. And spiritual forms have form, shape, and mass in their dimension, just like our physical form that we're able to perceive here have specific form. There's a specific end. You could tell where your body ends. You could tell where it ends. You can tell where it begins, where you begin, and where the next person ends. And so this is the same thing. Just because it's not perceived by us in our regular reality, this is something as well that in the ancient Kemetic people were able to make distinctions between the different forms, and even to make distinctions between the different parts of our spirit. So our name, for example, has its own spiritual form. It carries its own consciousness, its own energy, and it has its own place in space-time, in the space-time continuum, in its own dimension. So we actually have 9 different bodies, ranging all the way from like our universal body, which is part of the all, the totality of everything that is, all the way down to our physical form. And each of these is distinct, and each of these needs its own spiritual food, metaphysical food. It has its own needs, every single one of these bodies. So we have to remember that if we care enough to give our physical form the distinction to use deodorant that is only for men if you're a man, or only for women if you're a woman, we have to remember to give your spiritual form the one that's designed for it. So we have spiritual tools. Every tool for African people, in our culture, every single tool that we need to be complete as beings is all within our culture. It's all been defined, it's been laid out, and it's been used since the beginning of human time in order to keep going, keep thriving, to keep flourishing, and to keep being. And so there's no reason that now, especially now, while we're existing in a time when there is so much imbalance going on in the world, so much difference, this is a time that we need things like this to be separated, that we need to be understood. So there are a few distinct areas where culture actually makes a big difference. So I would personally just narrow them down into these fields. But diet is represented, and so these are different cultures. So if we think about if we were to go to China, or if we were to go to Russia, or if we were to go to Ghana, or if we were to go to Brazil, these are all distinct forms of cultural things, cultural differences that we would be able to see in all of these places. So diet, the kind of food people eat, that's their cultural food, and all other cultures in the world, especially if you see people come here, they will bring their culture food because people know that their health is connected to what it is they're eating. So they don't just come to the new land and start to eat other food. And for those that do, when they do start to do that, they start to get sick. When people come to this country and start to eat typical American fast food, a lot of times they'll gain weight, they'll get diabetes, they get very ill when they switch over from eating the food of their natural culture to eating an American diet. That happens on an extremely high level. Const actually happens when we choose to use spiritual forms that are for others. We may feel an elevation from our original state of being, but eventually, after a level of expansion and trying to expand and to try to feed ourselves off the culture of others, we eventually become ill because as I said before, there's a limit to how much you can actually absorb of somebody else's culture before it starts to affect who you are and how you feel about yourself. So the main areas of cultural differences seem to fall into the areas of diet, as I said, of medicine, because medicine is defined by how the body is viewed, and how the body is viewed is defined by what a person's spiritual system is. See, a lot of people don't realize this. Even in Western science, Western medical science is made up of ancient Greek and ancient Roman philosophy and understanding. So the way the body is seen, even the names of the body parts, all the Latin names of the body parts, all our body parts in Western science are named after Greek and Latin mythology. So if a body part appears to have a same movement or a same positioning as some myth from the times that they took those names from, they will give the same name to those body parts. So we're calling biceps and triceps and words like this, and these are actually words that are from an entirely different language and therefore a different culture. It's a different mythological culture than our own. And if you look at, for example, the distinction between Western science and the way Western science views health and illness, and then think about the way that Asian medicine, for example, like Chinese medicine with the 5 elements, views medicine and health and the body, there's an entirely different understanding. The way acupuncture works by opening up different energy fields that are flowing all through the body is an entirely different way of understanding the body than the Western way of seeing object. So there's a body part here, a body part here. They used cadavers because to them a body was just a body and there was no distinct consciousness or life form taking place inside of a body founded on dead bodies. They would dig up bodies out of graves and go and take them into the universities in the 1800s in the laboratories, chop them open, name the parts. And it's useful to have an understanding of where all the parts are and to be able to define and distinguish between the parts. But to begin with the perception that the body has no consciousness of its own was already, so the failing of Western medicine was built into it at the very beginning of its creation, of its development. And this is an extremely important form too. Even using medicine that is not part of your culture is very dangerous and very detrimental. Again, it can have benefits to have to use different types of medicine, different styles of medicine in order to heal yourself, but real medicine is actually maintaining the health. And real medicine involves taking care of your being so that you don't get ill and then responding to issues and imbalances that arise when you do become ill. So medicine is a distinct form. So the diet, when Chinese people come here, they come and they bring Chinatown and they bring Chinese food and they eat their own food as their main and staple diet. Medicine. Other people they come with their own forms of medicine that were being used in their area, in their culture, in their country when they come and bring that medicine with them because they know that's what's going to keep them healthy and well. Borrowing somebody else's medicine might fix a particular issue, but fixing a problem that arises is not the same as being healthy and being well. Real medicine is about being healthy and being well. So there's another area. And also economics. The way we treat money, the way we view money, the way we view the handling of money, the way we view earning the money, the way we view spending money, and the way we view saving money, all has to do, that's again based back on our culture. There are, for example, in the Middle Ages in Europe, to give an example, because I was a very big history buff at a point in time, to give, for an example, usury, which is collecting interest on a loan, was not allowed by the Christian church and was also not allowed in Islam, but it was allowed in Judaism. They found a way to go around the law in Judaism and still be able to collect interest on loans. So with that ability, what people was it that became the bankers? It's not an accident of just being in the right place at the right time. The culture and the people and the beings who then run and have domination in a specific types of fields that they have. The Jewish people took over the banking system because they did not have, usury was not a problem in their culture. So for other people, they would say, no, to collect interest off somebody, to take something from somebody because they need something from you is a sin against God. Like you can't do that. That's craziness. But they found a way around that. And so they said, well, I can lend you money as long as you give me back this much more money. And therefore, their culture sprung up to be bankers. So, and by not having that as part of the culture, other people were not able to develop banking. So because they were not able to develop banking, they had to use economics, bartering, trade, these kind of things. So even in economics, culture plays a huge role, and every cultural system always goes back down to the spiritual system. Your spiritual system is the foundation of every single thing. So when it comes down to the fact that you can, if the usury law had not been able to be started, if it had been illegal to everyone, then there would still be trade and barter and these kind of systems as the main economic systems. But because of the development, because somebody was able to say, somebody's culture was able to say, you know what, we're that's not part of our culture. We're not going to use that. It changed everything. And so, again, economics is a huge, important offshoot of cultural and of our spiritual foundation. So how we view money, how we view saving money, earning money, and spending money, and sharing money into our community in whatever form. And that doesn't mean money, physical cash. That means money just as far as the economics of what gets moved around in any community. All of that also depends specifically on what is the foundation of your culture. So we've got diet, we've got medicine, we've got economics, and sexuality. That's another one. It's extremely important. The spiritual foundation of your culture defines and decides for you what is the function of sexual energy, what is the purpose of sexuality, and how sexuality should be carried out. If you live or come from or exist culture that tells you sexual energy is dirty and filthy and wrong, then you will develop guilt. So even though your natural body was designed for such a function, and your heart and your energies and the way your own being was developed, you will still fight against your own being. So you have this capability inside you, which flows in an entirely different wave pattern. It has entirely different ebbs and flows to it than animals do, than other creatures. And so even though it is different, depending on what your culture tells you, you could say that the flow of this energy, you can ignore the flow of this energy, you can go suppress it to the point where you go overboard with the energy and where the energy corrupts itself inside you because of being suppressed so long, and then go overboard and in the opposite direction with it. But again, these are all points from what culture you come from. If your culture says you need to use sexual energy as a tool, it's not just a tool of procreation, that's its physical sense. For a culture that looks beyond the physical, for example, in African religion or in Hinduism, sexual energy is seen as a dynamic between two people. And so there's polarity involved, there's a dynamic involved, and it's understood that it's an extremely powerful force that, when used with consciousness, can really open people up to their own spiritual fire and their own spiritual energies. And so it's considered sacred because it is capable of giving so very much back to a person by engaging in it with the correct intentions. So that kind of culture, using that as your cultural foundation of sexuality, is going to come entirely different than somebody whose culture tells them sex between a man and a woman is filthy. They have to keep a sheet in between them and cut a hole in between the sheet and have sex just between the hole in the sheet. And the energy of completion between man and woman can never, ever be achieved because there's shame, guilt, it's considered filthy, and there is always, always a barrier. So whether the barrier is a sheet or whether the culture has come to accept that putting the condom is the barrier, whatever is the barrier, there is a barrier that is created between the natural functions of what sexual energy is. If you are told that having sex with another person is dirty, and you're accepting of wearing something like a piece of rubber in between you and the other person's body, then the acupuncture points that are genitals will never, ever get connected. And so you're literally just having sex with yourself using another person's body. So one of the main functions of sexuality is now destroyed. You've destroyed the very function of what the organs were designed to do, what they were designed by nature, in the incredible divine intelligence of nature, to actually come together and have those points do and touch and explode into a connection of polarity when they're together. So this is another sense of creating a limit. So you put a limit on but through the ignorance of accepting somebody else's culture who says, sure, it's okay to have sex with anybody as long as you throw on a condom. Now you feel that because you have no idea what sexual energy actually is. So because of your total ignorance and total lack of awareness, you're literally willing to put yourself in any kind of circumstance and touch yourself up against any sort of energies. And this is another sickness with going along with and accepting the culture of others. They'll do this, and then the condom breaks and they end up with a baby that they didn't mean to have. One person, because of the barrier that's created, and because of the lack of connection between the genitals, which automatically makes a connection between the heart region, between the heart center, the connection that is natural, the emotional connection that is natural with sexual energy is now cut off. And now it's easy to just use a body and then disappear again without having any connection. And then there are feelings that get hurt, and there's a whole host of problems that come out of, and this is just ignorance. This is just from ignorance and lack of understanding of what it is that this power actually is. Because again, this is what happens when we accept the culture of others and use their standards as our own. There's to each area of life that's important, there comes an ignorance. And when we begin to understand, then we can wake up to that and start to do more and do better. Now, so again, just to run down them again, so we have diet, medicine, economics, sexuality, and also relationships. And again, defining what it is a man and a woman are to be to one another. When we allow other cultures to define what a man and a woman are supposed to be to one another, very often, if we accept a culture whose spiritual foundation is not the same as our own, in which no other culture has the same exact spiritual foundation as African culture. So if you choose any other culture, whether it's Western culture, Chinese culture, Indian culture, whichever, it's going to have a different basis, it's going to have a different spiritual foundation and a different basis, and therefore a different outcome in its purpose. When in the West we say the feminist movement and what women are supposed to behave like, and we get our images of Beyonce and these sorts of things, like the new independent woman who does everything for herself, doesn't need a man, or for men who are complaining that women are gold diggers and that they are just out to get him, and that he's supposed to. I mean, there was a time when it would be unheard of to hear a man complain that a woman needed him financially or economically or in any other way. A woman is supposed to need a man. That's natural. That's part of nature. That's part of how we were designed. A man is supposed to want to provide for a woman and to give to her and share with her, not to look at her as a gold digger or that she's taking something, but if his mentality has been brainwashed into the acceptance that, oh, well, she's supposed to be independent and she's supposed to be able to do everything without me, and then he comes across a woman who needs him financially or by any other way, all of a sudden he feels used and taken for a ride because his basis foundation is she's not supposed to need me. And if she needs me, she's a Jezebel, and all of these other bizarre terms that we have that have come down from some of the westernized versions of religion that tell us that women are bad, women are evil, women are the origin of evil, and when a woman, and don't let a woman lead you astray, because in all through certain books there are just example after example after example of, oh, how bad women are and what terrible things they do and how a spiritual man just needs to get away from them and stay away from them. This spiritual foundation is the origin of this modern movement to separate men and women. In ancient African culture, every single thing from the point of origin of existence itself to the very cells in the body, every single thing has a feminine and a masculine polarity. Every single thing in existence has masculine and feminine polarity. And there's never, ever, ever a separation, and there's no duality in the sense of one having power over the other. So the need for the independent woman or the man who's strong and steps away, All of these things are totally unnatural and unnecessary to African culture. So by not choosing to use our own culture, once again, we fall into the traps of other people's spiritual systems and define ourselves and live our lives based on the culture of others. And then we don't even think about it. Many of these things I'm mentioning, diet, medicine, economics, people don't think of these as culture. All of these things are influenced by your culture, every single one of them. And everything in culture is signed by the spiritual origin, the spiritual foundation. So we have the sexuality, we have relationships, and then also even parenting. Now, the way children are raised is completely different based on the spiritual function and the spiritual understanding of the parents. If you feel that your children were born, you own them, you are supposed to define who they are and what they do for reality, and then they're going to die and then be dead and then lie around forever and ever and ever and ever waiting on some mystical being to wake them up at the end of time, they're going to have an entirely different style of parenting than somebody who believes that they are, for example, the guardian of their children, where the child has its own spiritual purpose and destiny, and the function of the parent is to awaken the child to their own destiny. So awakening a child to their own destiny would involve looking at them, studying their astrology, understanding who they are, watching their behavior, not forcing their behavior or directing their behavior, but observing their behavior, understanding who they are, what it is they need, and having readings done on them. And also even defining their name, having the name of the child chosen, because as I mentioned earlier, Ka, there's the Ka, and there's what's called the Ren. The Ka is the higher self, the being who's connected to you and is also connected to to deities who guard and guide our existence. The Ren is the name body, and it has its own distinct place in the time-space continuum, and it defines our character. So when it's understood by a parent, for example, that a child's name is there to define their character and therefore help guide their destiny, then they know that whatever name they give that child has to be the name that they live into. And in African culture, when you get a name, it's the name that you live into. So those are the attributes that you try to become. Not, you just am, and like, for example, in Native American, they observe the child, they see who they are, what are their characteristics, and then they give them a name based on their characteristics. In African culture, a child's destiny is understood. So there are readings done, priests are consulted, and when it's understood what the child is supposed to be or do or become, then a name can be chosen which reflects and assists in the process of spiritual awakening to help the person become who they are supposed to be. So eventually you'll find, for anybody who's ever gone through initiation or gone through a ceremony to be given a name, I'm not talking about, well, there are people who are named themselves, who take a name through a spiritual purpose, through some deep spiritual work. But a lot of people, of course, these days, who also are unaware of the and function of the sound body, of the name body, and just name themselves anything because it sounds good, or name themselves 25 things because they want to sound like they have read an awful lot of books. When the name is chosen, a lot of times we don't even match the name, and sometimes we can choose a name and be given a name that doesn't, and it's confusing because it doesn't seem like us at all. But when we understand that the name is the name we're supposed to live into, then all of a sudden it makes sense and it gives us guidance. So every time our name is called, we are reminded of who we are supposed to be. Now this is a powerful tool when we think that just every time when you choose your child's name, so again, I'm back talking about parenting here, when you choose your child's name with an understanding of you are their guardian, and you are here to guide them to their own destiny. When you choose, when the name is chosen and you give that name, every time you call the child's name, you are now reminding them and you are invoking them into their own destiny. These are conscious tools that, again, cannot be accessed when you tap into the culture of others. Knowing your own culture gives the greatest amount of wisdom and the greatest amount of understanding, and opens up tools to you that you would never be aware of unless you were able to tap in to what it is that your spiritual foundation is. And again, back to so these are the 6 main areas that I've seen. So to recap them for the last time, diet, because I really want everyone to really think about these. These are 6 areas of life. Really assess yourself. Really assess how much of your own culture do you apply to these 6 areas, and how much of the culture is what you just accept by default, or just have been forced to accept based on your circumstances. Really think about your diet. Where did you come up with your diet? How did you come to eat culture? Are those foods from? Where do they originate? Because people, especially in our community, a lot of times people will come up and have this big linguistic ego thing, and this defining words, and this word comes from this place, and the breakdown of this word, and the origin of this word is this and that. But words serve in their own way, but words, you don't apply this wisdom to something like food, something useful, something that has value. Food, it's important to know where your food is actually coming from. Where's the origin of that food? If you're eating burgers, where do burgers originate from? I bet you're not going to look back in your culture and find that burgers originated back with African culture ever. And look at that. It's with the same fire, origin of the culture of these 6 areas of life. And just take an assessment of yourself and try to become consciously aware of whether you live in your own African culture with these 6 areas. Look at your diet. Is your diet consistent with what the needs of what the nutritional needs are of an African diet? And this isn't just specifically with only the foods, but the energies. Remember that the foods came out the way they did because they are manifesting a specific energy from that part of the earth, from the part of the earth where your bloodline, your ancestral bloodline originated. The energy from your origin, from your point of origin. Are you using medicines? And again, medicines are interchangeable with foods because they should be the plants, they should be the crystals, they should be the trees that you sit under, the grass that you walk in to get your healing, these kind of things. Are you using medicines that are in keeping with your areas, with your bloodline? Are you using economics that have a spiritual foundation in your African culture? What kind of economics were being used in the area? There's communalism, there's trade. How often do you offer something out in trade? How often do you barter with somebody? How much time do you spend chasing money and just thinking about money? Is chasing money, is that a part of your culture? Is that a part of the origin of your culture? And obviously it's understandable that we exist in a time where getting away from currency completely is difficult to impossible, depending on a person's immediate circumstances. It's not impossible to change it and to get away from it, but it is sometimes in people's immediate circumstances, these kind of things are impossible. And that's understandable, but as long as we make the move and the work to put forward to actually change those circumstances. So are you practicing economics of your culture? Are you practicing the sexuality of your culture? What is the spiritual foundation sexuality? How does your culture view sexuality? Study that, learn it, find out, and then assess yourself and see whether you're having sexuality in your culture? If you're going to strip clubs every weekend, you can guarantee that your ancestors were not engaging in that kind of energy. Look at a strip club. Look at the origin of that. Research that and find out what is the point of origin of that culture. Who created that and why? And look at that. Who created even these movies that are just full of so much raw sexuality, stuff that left between two people that should be their private energy, their private affair, and dreams, putting it all over everywhere. What's happening to you when you watch those sort of things? Now, remember, and even when sexual energy is put into commercials and all these sorts of things, because look at the culture, whose culture you're using and whose culture you're accepting when you allow those things. And your relationship. How do you view men? How do you view women? What do you view? What does your culture say the role of your gender is, based on the deities in your religion, based on the deities, based on the ancestral energies, based on the relationship? Is your religion, your ancient spiritual culture saying about your gender? And then what is it saying about the opposite gender? And are you living in a way that reflects what your culture says about the two genders and your place in that dynamic? And your parenting. Are you parenting as an ex-slave, where you're beating your children all the time if they do something wrong, where you force them to be what it is you need them to be, or what you have preconceived, the idea you have preconceived about who they should be? Are you aware of what your child's spiritual function is on their habits, their character, their likes and dislikes? Are you using those as tools to understand who your child is so that you can step back and understand how you need to guide them? Or are you forcing them to be something in order to keep up with the standards of a culture that's not your own? So all of these things have to be really, really assessed. This is something I am so tired of hearing in the conscious community, people saying, oh, they stole our culture. These people stole this from us. These people stole that from us. We are constantly complaining about all this theft that went on, and this is known. We know this already. Anybody who has any level of awareness of African culture is aware that our music gets stolen, and we don't get credit for it. Our spiritual systems are stolen and twisted and shifted, and then we don't get credit for it, and often fed right back to us for us to purchase. We know that other cultures in the world are stealing and benefiting off of our greatest tools, perceptions, wisdoms that we have the spiritual and cultural foundation to create. Why are we still complaining about that? Because especially some of the main people who complain about these things are the people who are not even using the culture anyway. If you want to complain that there's a movie about ancient Egypt and it's full of white people, are you practicing ancient Egyptian culture? Before you complain that, are you going to your shrine every day? Are you connecting with your ancestors? Are you connecting with the divine forces? Are you attempting to live your life in a way that the ancient ancestors from that? If you're not, you don't have a right to complain that somebody else is using it, because the truth is actually universal. The truth belongs to everybody. So out of anybody's mouth, a true word can be spoken. There were a few weeks ago when someone got upset with me for saying a quote that was from an American author from the 1800s, and was saying that I love this person, and why should I accept the words of this person? The truth does not belong to anybody, and I will never, ever, ever give away the power of the truth to be in the ownership of one hand. Never. I understand the truth for what it is. It's universal. But culture is extremely specific. Using other people's culture is something else, because your culture contains codes in it that are specifically designed to work with your DNA. Your physical being, is programmed to remember, to react, and to respond and to relate to the food, medicine, plants, sounds, behaviors of your blood circle. Stop allowing your physical being and all of the bodies, all of the things, your name being, your physical being, your deities who guard you, your guardians, all of these things should be in keeping with your culture. You are not an accident. You did not come here in a melanated body in order to just be floated around like a cork on the sea, just bumping into any old culture and using it because it's right there. You are put together with the wisdom and the divine intelligence of proportions that you cannot even conceive. Don't throw away your divine right of who you were created to be by giving yourself away to the culture of others. And people say, well, it doesn't matter and everything originated with us and I can use anything I want. But think about this. This is the last thought, and I'm going to leave you with this. Think about if you have a liver inside your body and your liver works just fine. Let's say you have a twin brother. Would you go and get a transplant from your twin brother in order to put it inside where your own liver goes just because your twin brother is similar to you? No. Just because something comes from African culture does not mean that it's for you. We have everything we need right in our own culture, so let's start to use it. Stop complaining about others. Start using what's yours.